They say that when you lose everything, silence follows. But in my case, silence came first. It was the silence of an empty house, not the comforting kind, but the one that lingers after someone leaves and takes their voice with them. That someone was my wife, Rachel. We'd been married for 17 years. She used to hum while making coffee, little half-melodies that filled the mornings with warmth. Then, one day, the humming stopped. And a week later, so did she. No note, no call. Just her car gone, her closet half empty, her wedding ring left in the bathroom sink like a quiet insult. At 43, I was living in Port Townsend, Washington, the kind of coastal town that looks calm but hides rot beneath its wood and salt. I taught creative writing at a small community college, mostly to people who didn't want to be there. My students called me Mr. H because Harrison was too formal and Matt felt too personal. My life was simple. Coffee at 7:15, class at 9, whiskey by 10 p.m., until the night I received an email from Rachel's account. Subject: the lake isn't what it seems. Body: stop digging. You'll drown like the rest. It was sent from her old address, but the timestamp was from a public Wi-Fi in Boise, Idaho, 800 miles away. The thing is, I wasn't digging. Not yet. The next morning, I drove to Crescent Lake, where she used to kayak on weekends. The water there is unnervingly clear. You can see 15 feet down, maybe more. Locals call it the mirror because it reflects the mountains like glass. Rachel loved it. She said it made her feel weightless. Now it just made me feel watched. At the northern dock, I saw Eli, a park ranger in his 50s who'd known us both. He looked surprised to see me. She didn't tell you? He asked. Tell me what? That she came back here last month. I stared at him. That's impossible. She left 3 months ago. Eli shrugged. Maybe so, but I saw her. Same jacket, same kayak. Said she was doing research for some article. She didn't stay long, though. 2 men came looking for her later. Wore suits. Said they were from a bank. A bank. Rachel had been a financial analyst once, before she quit to find herself. I never asked what that meant. Now I wished I had. I rented a room by the lake that night, unable to go home. The walls smelled of mildew and old cigarettes. I kept the blinds half closed and reread her email until my eyes blurred. The lake isn't what it seems. At 1:32 a.m., I heard a splash outside, sharp, deliberate. I opened the curtains. The dock lights flickered once. Then I saw ripples spreading across the black water, as if someone had just slipped beneath the surface. I grabbed my flashlight and ran. Nothing, just still water and a single red glove floating near the edge. Rachel's glove. I called the sheriff the next morning. They sent a diver team. After 3 hours, they surfaced with something, not a body, but a waterproof bag sealed tight. Inside were papers, waterlogged and barely legible. The only words that stood out were printed in bold at the top of one page. Property of Aurelion Trust. I'd never heard of it, but later that day, I searched the name online. It didn't exist. Not publicly. That night, someone knocked on my motel door. 3 times, slow, even patient. When I opened it, a man stood there in a gray suit, smiling like a salesman. Mr. Harrison, he said, you've been asking about things that don't concern you. He held out a card. It was blank. Walk away, he said, or you'll end up like your wife. Then he turned and disappeared into the rain. For hours I sat on the bed, staring at that empty card under the dim lamp. It looked harmless, like everything that ruins your life does. At first. In the distance, I could still hear the sound of water against the dock, slow and rhythmic, like breathing. And for the first time since Rachel left, I realized I wasn't grieving anymore. I was afraid. The morning after the man in the gray suit came to my door, I packed my things and left the motel before sunrise. The lake was covered in fog, heavy, white, and almost alive, curling through the trees like breath from something ancient. I told myself I was leaving because it was over, but I knew better. When someone tells you walk away, that's when you start digging. I drove south 4 hours with the windows down, the cold wind keeping me awake. The card he'd given me lay on the passenger seat, blank on both sides, until sunlight hit it just right. Then faint letters appeared, burned into the surface like a watermark. Aurelion Trust, Field Operations, Seattle de Vicenzo. Not just a name, a structure, a company pretending not to exist. Rachel had once told me something, years ago, back when she was working at Barclay and Lowell, a consultancy firm for high-end investors. We were drinking cheap red wine in our first apartment, the rain soft against the window. She said, the richest people in the world don't move money, they move silence. At the time, I'd laughed. Now it didn't feel like a metaphor. In Seattle, I tracked down an old colleague of hers, Daniel Crane, who'd left the firm around the same time Rachel did. It took 3 calls and a few lies about academic research to get him to meet me at a cafe near Pike Place Market. He looked nervous the moment he saw me. Balding, maybe mid-40s, his tie too tight. Matt Harrison, I said, extending a hand. He didn't take it. You shouldn't have come here. I just want to know what Aurelion Trust is. Crane glanced around the cafe. Keep your voice down. Then, leaning forward, Aurelion isn't a trust. It's a clearing shell, an invisible bank that processes transactions governments can't admit exist. They don't deal in money anymore, Matt. They deal in influence. Rachel found something in their accounts, something she wasn't supposed to see. What kind of something? Human data, behavioral markets, people's private information, tied to predictive modeling. She said they were using emotion tracking to manipulate investments before they happened. He took a deep breath. When she went missing, I assumed she'd been silenced. I showed him the email I'd received. His face drained of color. That wasn't Rachel. Or if it was, it wasn't her anymore. What do you mean? He hesitated. She told me once they were developing a continuity system, a kind of digital ghost. If a person disappeared, the system could keep sending messages, mimicking their patterns. To erase suspicion, my stomach turned cold. You're saying my wife's alive? Or that something is pretending to be her? He didn't answer. When I left the cafe, I noticed a car idling across the street, black SUV, tinted windows. It pulled out just as I turned the corner. I ducked into an alley and watched it drive by twice before it disappeared. They were following me. That night I checked into another cheap motel, just outside Tacoma. I turned off my phone, covered the smoke detector camera, and sat in the dark. I couldn't sleep. Every few minutes, I thought I heard footsteps outside my door, soft, deliberate, then gone. At 2:18 a.m., the mail notification tone buzzed. My laptop, despite being offline. The message came from Rachel's address again. Subject: don't trust Crane body. He's not who you think. The truth is under the lake. Room 12, Crescent Inn. I hadn't told anyone I'd been at Crescent Lake, let alone which motel I stayed in. Room 12 had been mine. I packed and drove back before dawn, every mile heavier than the last. The highway felt endless, a gray ribbon between fog and forest. When I reached Crescent Inn, police tape fluttered across the entrance. 2 cruisers, a coroner's van. The park ranger stood near the dock talking to a deputy. His face was pale. I parked and walked over. What happened? He blinked like he was seeing a ghost. Matt, Jesus, you shouldn't be here. They found someone in room 12 this morning. Said his ID said Crane. I felt the world narrow to a tunnel. Daniel Crane. I nodded slowly. Shot once. Close range. That night, back in my truck, I stared at Rachel's last message. Don't trust Crane. If she or whatever was pretending to be her had warned me, then it knew Crane would die, meaning someone was watching both of us. I drove to the lake again. The fog was thicker this time, swallowing the trees whole. I walked out to the dock, the same one where I'd found her glove. The boards creaked under my weight. Then from the dark water below came a sound of faint, rhythmic tapping, almost like metal against metal. I knelt down, shone my flashlight into the water. Something gleamed beneath the surface, a corner of what looked like a metal case wedged between rocks. The sound grew louder. Tap, tap, tap. I reached in. My arm submerged up to the elbow, fingertips brushing cold metal. Then movement. A ripple, something fast brushing past my hand. I yanked my arm back just as the case shifted, rising slowly toward the surface. It broke through the water, coated in mud, marked with faint letters, Aurelion, classified, level 3, and taped across the lid. A message scrawled in red ink, "If you open this, you'll see what she saw." I stared at it for a long time, and even though every part of me said don't, I dragged the case onto the dock, opened the rusted latches, and inside was a single hard drive wrapped in plastic, and an envelope with my name written in Rachel's handwriting. I didn't open it, not yet, because I suddenly understood what that sound was. The tapping hadn't come from the case, it had come from beneath it. Something or someone was still down there. The next morning, I stared at the case sitting on the motel floor. It was covered in dried lake mud, and every time I looked at it, I felt the same thing, dread wrapped in curiosity. Rachel's handwriting on the envelope looked too real to be fake. The slight slant to the R, the way she'd pressed too hard on the downstrokes, I knew it by heart. I used to joke that she signed her name like she was carving something permanent, but if she'd written this, it meant she'd been alive or close enough to it after she vanished. Inside the envelope were 2 items, a key card with Aurelion West access level B stamped on the front, and a note. "If you're reading this, it means I failed. Don't trust the trust. It's not a bank, it's a machine. They don't invest in money. They invest in people. Everything you feel, every fear, every hesitation, they model it. They use it. I tried to stop them. You'll have to finish what I started. You'll find me where the current ends. No signature. Just a small water stain at the bottom, like a tear had dropped there before the ink dried. I connected the hard drive to an old laptop. It took 3 tries to power up. The files were encrypted, but one folder was open. /test_subject/ inside were dozens of names, people from all over the country. Next to each name was a tag: status, active, inactive, deceased. Then I saw hers. Reaves, Rachel, status, transferred. I didn't know what transferred meant, but it didn't sound human. Another folder, labeled /behavioral_prediction_logs/ contained timestamped videos, facial scans, heart rate charts, even psychological profiles. At the bottom, one file stood out, subject Harrison, and my own name. When I played it, I saw myself sitting in my classroom, lecturing, grading papers, drinking at my desk. The camera angle was impossible, like it was taken from a place I'd never seen. The file description read, observation, subject unaware of tracking, predicted emotional deviation, 4.7% primary trigger, loss of spouse. I felt the floor tilt under me. They hadn't just been watching Rachel, they'd been watching me. The key card led me to Aurelion West, a glass and steel building outside Bellevue. It looked like any other tech campus: a manicured lawns, security gates, a flag that said "Data is Humanity." I drove there near midnight, parked a mile away, and hiked through the woods behind the compound. The security lights buzzed faintly. I found a side door marked maintenance. The key card slid through, beeped green. Inside was a hallway of polished concrete and humming vents. It didn't feel like an office. It felt like a bunker pretending to be one. On the 2nd floor, I found a row of glass rooms, each one filled with machines that looked like MRI scanners mixed with VR pods. Screens lined the walls showing people's faces in real time, blinking, breathing, sleeping. Each one had a name, a date of birth, a brainwave graph. When I reached the 3rd pod from the end, my chest froze. Reaves, Rachel, status, active. Her face filled the screen, pale, eyes closed, tubes running across her temples. She looked alive, or almost. Her heart rate was steady. Her brain waves flickered like lightning on a monitor. I pressed my hand to the glass. Rachel, I whispered. And then, for a fraction of a second, her eyes opened, not fully, just a twitch, a flicker. But enough. She saw me. The machine beeped rapidly, alarms flaring red. I panicked, smashing the console with my elbow until sparks flew. Then a voice behind me said, calm and cold, I told you to walk away. It was the man in the gray suit. He raised a gun, motioned toward the wall. Step back, Mr. Harrison. I did. She volunteered, he said. Project Continuum. Her mind was the prototype. We were mapping human decision-making in real time. She thought it was data collection. It was replication. I said, barely breathing. She became part of the system. The algorithm that predicts emotion. What you've been getting from her isn't her ghost. It's her pattern. The part of her that still exists inside Horizon. He tilted his head. You wanted to find her. Congratulations, you just did. I lunged for the gun. We struggled. His elbow slammed into my ribs. I hit him with the case, and the weapon clattered across the floor. I grabbed it and fired once. The shot echoed through the sterile air. He fell without a sound. The alarms grew louder. I turned back to the pod. Rachel's vitals were spiking. Rachel, I shouted. I'm getting you out. But the screens flashed data transfer in progress. Her heartbeat flattened into a straight line. Then the power cut out. I don't remember how I got out. Just running through the corridors. Red lights spinning, the taste of metal in my mouth. When I reached the woods, I looked back and saw the building go dark, like the whole place had exhaled and died. In my pocket, the key card was still warm. And when I checked my phone, a new message blinked onto the screen. No signal, no sender. She's not gone. She's inside. I stared at it for a long time. The words pulsed once, twice, then vanished, replaced by a single line of code. Transfer complete, subject and Harrison. And suddenly, the sound of water was back, faint, steady, echoing in my head, the sound of the current.